Good evening, my friend. The day is ending, and the night is waiting to carry you somewhere softer. Tell me, what time is it where you are? Midnight already? Or just the quiet after a long day? Whisper it in the comments before you drift away. Tonight, we journey into The Gray Fairy Book by Andrew Lang. A hidden doorway to forgotten kingdoms, brave hearts, and gentle magic. So settle in, breathe slow, and let your thoughts grow light as feathers. Now, close your eyes. The fairy world is opening its gates for you. The story of the fair Circassians. We were born in Circassia of poor people, and my sister's name is Tazila, and mine Daily. Having nothing but our beauty to help us in life, we were carefully trained in all the accomplishments that give pleasure. We were both quick to learn, and from our childhood could play all sorts of instruments, could sing, and above all, could dance. We were besides lively and merry, as in spite of our misfortunes, we are to this day. We were easily pleased and quite content with our lives at home, when one morning the officials who had been sent to find wives for the Sultan saw us and were struck with our beauty. We had always expected something of the sort, and were resigned to our lot when we chanced to see two young men enter our house. The elder, who was about 20 years of age, had black hair and very bright eyes. The other could not have been more than 15, and was so fair that he might easily have passed for a girl. They knocked at the door with a timid air and begged our parents to give them shelter, as they had lost their way. After some hesitation, their request was granted, and they were invited into the room in which we were. And if our parents' hearts were touched by their beauty, our own were not any harder, so that our departure for the palace, which had been arranged for the next day, suddenly became intolerable to us. Night came, and I awoke from my sleep to find the younger of the two strangers sitting at my bedside, and felt him take my hand. "Fear nothing, lovely Deli," he whispered, "from one who never knew love till he saw you. My name," he went on, "is Prince Delicate, and I am the son of the king of the Isle of Black Marble. My friend, who travels with me, is one of the richest nobles of my country, and the secrets which he knows are the envy of the Sultan himself. And we left our native country because my father wished me to marry a lady of great beauty, but with one eye a trifle smaller than the other. My vanity was flattered at so speedy a conquest, and I was charmed with the way the young man had declared his passion. I turned my eyes slowly on him, and the look I gave him caused him almost to lose his senses. He fell fainting forward, and I was unable to move till Tazila, who had hastily put on a dress, ran to my assistance, together with Thelamis, the young noble of whom the prince had spoken. As soon as we were all ourselves again, we began to bewail our fate and the journey that we were to take that very day to Constantinople. But we felt a little comforted when Thelamis assured us that he and the prince would follow in our steps and would somehow contrive to speak to us. Then they kissed our hands and left the house by a side way. A few moments later, our parents came to tell us that the escort had arrived, and having taken farewell of them, we mounted the camels and took our seats in a kind of box that was fixed to the side of the animal. These boxes were large enough for us to sleep in comfortably, and as there was a window in the upper part, we were able to see the country through which we passed. For several days we journeyed on, feeling sad and anxious as to what might become of us, when one day, as I was looking out of the window of our room, I heard my name called and beheld a beautifully dressed girl jumping out of the box on the other side of our camel. One glance told me that it was the prince, and my heart bounded with joy. It was, he said, Thelamis's idea to disguise him like this, and that he himself had assumed the character of a slave dealer who was taking this peerless maiden as a present to the Sultan. Thelamis had also persuaded the officer in charge of the caravan to let him hire the vacant box, so it was easy for the prince to scramble out of his own window and approach ours. This ingenious trick enchanted us, but our agreeable conversation was soon interrupted by the attendants, who perceived that the camel was walking in a crooked manner and came to find out what was wrong. Luckily, they were slow in their movements, and the prince had just time to get back to his own box and restore the balance before the trick was discovered. But neither the prince nor his friend had any intention of allowing us to enter the Sultan's palace, though it was difficult to know how we were to escape and what was to become of us when once we had escaped. At length, one day, as we were drawing near Constantinople, we learned from the prince that Thelamis had made acquaintance with a holy dervish whom he had met on the road, and had informed him that we were his sisters, who were being sold as slaves against his will. The good man was interested in the story and readily agreed to find us shelter if we could manage to elude the watchfulness of our guards. The risk was great, but it was our only chance that night when the whole caravan was fast asleep. We raised the upper part of our boxes, and by the help of Thelamis, climbed silently out. We next went back some distance along the way we had come. Then, striking into another road, reached at last the retreat prepared for us by the dervish. Here we found food and rest, and I need not say what happiness it was so to be free once more. The dervish soon became a slave to our beauty. And the day after our escape, he proposed that we should allow him to conduct us to an inn situated at a short distance, where we should find 2 Jews, owners of precious talismans, which did not really belong to them. "Try," said the dervish, "by some means to get possession of them." The inn, though not on the direct road to Constantinople, was a favorite one with merchants, owing to the excellence of the food. And on our arrival, we discovered at least 6 or 8 other people who had stopped for refreshment. They greeted us politely, and we sat down to table together. In a short time, the 2 men described by the dervish entered the room, and at a sign from him, my sister made room at her side for one, while I did the same for the other. Now the dervish had happened to mention that their brother had danced. At the moment, we paid no attention to this remark, but it came back to our minds now, and we determined that they should dance also. To accomplish this, we used all our arts, and very soon bent them to our wills, so that they could refuse us nothing. At the end of the day, we remained possessors of the talismans, and had left them to their fate, while the prince and Thalamis fell more in love with us than ever, and declared that we were more lovely than any women in the world. The sun had set before we quitted the inn, and we had made no plans as to where we should go next, so we readily consented to the prince's proposal that we should embark without delay for the Isle of Black Marble. What a place it was! Rocks blacker than jet towered above its shores and shed thick darkness over the country. Our sailors had not been there before and were nearly as frightened as ourselves. But thanks to Thalamis, who undertook to be our pilot, we landed safely on the beach. When we had left the coast behind us, with its walls of jet, we entered a lovely country where the fields were greener, the streams clearer, and the sun brighter than anywhere else. The people crowded round to welcome their prince, whom they loved dearly. But they told him that the king was still full of rage at his son's refusal to marry his cousin, the Princess Okimpare, and also at his flight. Indeed, they all begged him not to visit the capital, as his life would hardly be safe. So, much as I should have enjoyed seeing the home of my beloved prince, I implored him to listen to this wise advice and to let us all go to Thalamis's palace in the middle of a vast forest. To my sister and myself, who had been brought up in a cottage, this house of Thalamis's seemed like fairyland. It was built of pink marble, so highly polished that the flowers and streams surrounding it were reflected as in a mirror. One set of rooms was furnished especially for me in yellow silk and silver to suit my black hair. Fresh dresses were provided for us every day, and we had slaves to wait on us. Ah, why could not this happiness have lasted forever? the peace of our lives was troubled by Thalamus's jealousy of my sister, as he could not endure to see her on friendly terms with the prince, though knowing full well that his heart was mine. Every day we had scenes of tender reproaches and of explanations, but Tazila's tears never failed to bring Thalamus to his knees with prayers for forgiveness. We had been living in this way for some months, when one day the news came that the king had fallen dangerously ill. I begged the prince to hurry at once to the court, both to see his father and also to show himself to the senators and nobles. But as his love for me was greater than his desire of a crown, he hesitated, as if foreseeing all that afterwards happened. At last, Tazila spoke to him so seriously in Thalamus's presence that he determined to go, but promised that he would return before night. Night came, but no prince, and Tazila, who had been the cause of his departure, showed such signs of uneasiness that Thalamus's jealousy was at once awakened. As for me, I cannot tell what I suffered. Not being able to sleep, I rose from my bed and wandered into the forest, along the road which he had taken so many hours before. Suddenly, I heard in the distance the sound of a horse's hoofs, and in a few moments, the prince had flung himself down and was by my side. "Ah, how I adore you," he exclaimed. "Thalamus's love will never equal mine." The words were hardly out of his mouth when I heard a slight noise behind, and before we could turn round, both our heads were rolling in front of us, while the voice of Thalamus cried, "Perjured wretches, answer me, and you, faithless Tazila, tell me why you have betrayed me like this." Then I understood what had happened, and that in his rage he had mistaken me for my sister. "Alas," replied my head in weak tones, "I am not Tazila, but Deli, whose life you have destroyed, as well as that of your friend." At this, Thalamus paused and seemed to reflect for an instant. "Be not frightened," he said more quietly. "I can make you whole again." And laying a magic powder on our tongues, he placed our heads on our necks. In the twinkling of an eye, our heads were joined to our bodies, without leaving so much as a scar, only that, blinded with rage as he still was, Thalamus had placed my head on the prince's body, and his on mine. I cannot describe to you how odd we both felt at this strange transformation. We both instinctively put up our hands, he to feel his hair, which was, of course, dressed like a woman's, and I to raise the turban which pressed heavily on my forehead. But we did not know what had happened to us, for the night was still dark. At this point, Tazila appeared, followed by a troop of slaves bearing flowers. It was only by the light of their torches that we understood what had occurred. Indeed, the first thought of both of us was that we must have changed clothes. Now, in spite of what we may say, we all prefer our own bodies to those of anybody else. So notwithstanding our love for each other, at first we could not help feeling a little cross with Thelamis. However, so deep was the prince's passion for me that very soon he began to congratulate himself on the change. "My happiness is perfect," he said. "My heart, beautiful daily, has always been yours. And now I have your head also." But though the prince made the best of it, Thelamis was much ashamed of his stupidity. "I have," he said hesitatingly, "2 other pastilles which have the same magic properties as those I used before. Let me cut off your heads again, and that will put matters straight." The proposal sounded tempting, but was a little risky, and after consulting together, we decided to let things remain as they were. "Do not blame me then," continued Thelamis, "if you will not accept my offer. But take the 2 pastilles, and if it ever happens that you are decapitated a second time, make use of them in the way I have shown you, and each will get back his own head." So saying, he presented us with the pastilles, and we all returned to the castle. However, the troubles caused by the unfortunate exchange were only just beginning. My head, without thinking what it was doing, led the prince's body to my apartments. But my women, only looking at the dress, declared I had mistaken the corridor, and called some slaves to conduct me to His Highness's rooms. This was bad enough, but when, as it was still night, my servants began to undress me, I nearly fainted from surprise and confusion. And no doubt the prince's head was suffering in the same manner at the other end of the castle. By the next morning, you will easily guess that we slept but little. We had grown partly accustomed to our strange situation, and when we looked in the mirror, the prince had become brown-skinned and black-haired, while my head was covered with his curly golden locks. And after that first day, everyone in the palace had become so accustomed to the change that they thought no more about it. Some weeks after this, we heard that the king of the Isle of Black Marble was dead. The prince's head, which once was mine, was full of ambitious desires, and he longed to ride straight to the capital and proclaim himself king. But then came the question as to whether the nobles would recognize the prince with a girl's body. And indeed, when we came to think of it, which was prince and which was girl? At last, after much argument, my head carried the day, and we set out, but only to find that the king had declared the Princess Okimpare his successor. The greater part of the senators and nobles openly professed that they would much have preferred the rightful heir, but as they could not recognize him either in the prince or me, they chose to consider us as impostors and threw us into prison. A few days later, Tezila and Thelamis, who had followed us to the capital, came to tell us that the new queen had accused us of high treason and had herself been present at our trial, which was conducted without us. They had been in mortal terror as to what would be our sentence, but by a piece of extraordinary luck, we had been condemned to be beheaded. I told my sister that I did not see exactly where the luck came in, but Thelamis interrupted me rudely. "What?" he cried. "Of course I shall make use of the pastilles." But here the officers arrived to lead us to the great square where the execution was to take place, for Okimpere was determined there should be no delay. The square was crowded with people of all ages and all ranks, and in the middle, a platform had been erected on which was the scaffold, with the executioner in a black mask standing by. At a sign from him, I mounted first, and in a moment, my head was rolling at his feet. With a bound, my sister and Thelamis were beside me, and like lightning, Thelamis seized the saber from the headsman and cut off the head of the prince. And before the multitude had recovered from their astonishment at these strange proceedings, our bodies were joined to our right heads, and the pastilles placed on our tongues. Then Thelamis led the prince to the edge of the platform and presented him to the people, saying, "Behold your lawful king." Shouts of joy rent the air at the sound of Thelamis's words, and the noise reached Okimpere in the palace. Smitten with despair at the news, she fell down unconscious on her balcony and was lifted up by the slaves and taken back to her own house. Meanwhile, our happiness was all turned to sorrow. I had rushed up to the prince to embrace him fondly, when he suddenly grew pale and staggered. "I die faithful to you," he murmured, turning his eyes towards me. "And I dea king." And leaning his head on my shoulder, he expired quietly, for one of the arteries in his neck had been cut through. Not knowing what I did, I staggered towards the saber which was lying near me, with the intention of following my beloved prince as speedily as possible. And when Thelamis seized my hand, but only just in time, in my madness, I turned the saber upon him, and he fell struck through the heart at my feet. The whole company were listening to the story with breathless attention, when it became plain that Delhi could go no further, while Tazila had flung herself on a heap of cushions and hidden her face. Zambak ordered her women to give them all the attention possible, and desired they should be carried into her own rooms. When the two sisters were in this condition, Ibrahim, who was a very prudent young man, suggested to his parents that, as the two Circassians were both unconscious, it would be an excellent opportunity to search them and see if the talismans belonging to the daughters of Sirocco were concealed about their persons. But the Bassa, shocked at the notion of treating his guests in so inhospitable a manner, refused to do anything of the kind, adding that the next day he hoped to persuade them to give the talismans up of their own free will. By this time it was nearly midnight, and Nienger, who was standing near the Jewess Sumi, drew out the portrait of Argentine and heard with delight that she was even more beautiful than her picture. Everyone was waiting on tiptoe for the appearance of the two watches, who were expected when the clock struck 12 to come in search of Sumi. And that there might be no delay, the Bassa ordered all the doors to be flung wide open. It was done, and there entered not the longed-for watches, but the page who had been sent away in disgrace. Then the Bassa arose in wrath. "Azemi," he said, "did I not order you to stand no more in my presence?" "My lord," replied Azemi modestly, "I was hidden outside the door, listening to the tale of the two Circassians. And as I know you are fond of stories, give me also leave to tell you one. I promise you it shall not be long." "Speak on," replied the Bassa, "but take heed what you say." "My lord," began Azemi, "this morning I was walking in the town when I noticed a man going in the same direction, followed by a slave. He entered a baker's shop, where he bought some bread, which he gave to the slave to carry. I watched him and saw that he purchased many other kinds of provisions at other places. And when the slave could carry no more, his master commanded him to return home and have supper ready at midnight. When left alone, the man went up the street and, turning into a jeweler's shop, brought out a watch that, as far as I could see, was made of silver. He walked on a few steps, then stooped and picked up a gold watch which lay at his feet. At this point, I ran up and told him that if he did not give me half its price, I would report him to the Qadi. He agreed, and conducting me to his house, produced 400 sequins, which he said was my share, and having got what I wanted, I went away. As it was the hour for attending on my lord, I returned home and accompanied you to the Qadi, where I heard the story of the 3 Jews and learned the importance of the 2 watches I had left at the stranger's. I hastened to his house, but he had gone out, and I could only find the slave, whom I told that I was the bearer of important news for his master. Believing me to be one of his friends, he begged me to wait, and showed me into a room where I saw the 2 watches lying on the table. I put them in my pocket, leaving the 400 sequins in place of the gold watch and 3 gold pieces, which I knew to be the price of the other. As you know, the watches never remain with the person who buys them. This man may think himself very lucky to get back his money. I have wound them both up, and at this instant, Aurora and Argentine are locked safely into my own room. Everybody was so delighted to hear this news that Azemi was nearly stifled with their embraces. and Nianger could hardly be prevented from running to break in the door, though he did not even know where the page slept. But the page begged to have the honor of fetching the ladies himself, and soon returned leading them by the hand. For some minutes, all was a happy confusion, and Ibrahim took advantage of it to fall on his knees before Aurora and search in the fifth fold of her dress for the missing coral bead. The book of spells had told the truth. There it was. And as the chaplet was now complete, the young man's days of seeking were over. In the midst of the general rejoicing, Hassan alone bore a gloomy face. "Alas," he said, "everyone is happy, but the miserable being you see before you. I have lost the only consolation in my grief, which was to feel that I had a brother in misfortune." "Be comforted," replied the Bassa. "Sooner or later, the dervish who stole the pink bag is sure to be found." Supper was then served, and after they had all eaten of rare fruits, which seemed to them the most delicious in the whole world, the Bassa ordered the flask containing the elixir of love to be brought, and the young people to drink of it. Then their eyes shone with a new fire, and they swore to be true to each other till death. This ceremony was scarcely over when the clock struck 1, and in an instant Aurora and Argentine had vanished, and in the place where they stood lay 2 watches. Silence fell upon all the company. They had forgotten the enchantment. Then the voice of Azemi was heard asking if he might be allowed to take charge of the watches till the next day, pledging his head to end their enchantment. With the consent of Sumi, this was granted, and the Bassa gave Azemi a purse containing 1,000 sequins as a reward for the services he had already rendered to them. After this, everybody went to his own apartment. Azemi had never possessed so much money before, and never closed his eyes for joy the whole night long. Very early, he got up and went into the garden, thinking how he could break the enchantment of the daughters of Sirocco. Suddenly, the soft tones of a woman fell on his ear, and peeping through the bushes, he saw Tazila, who was arranging flowers in her sister's hair. The rustling of the leaves caused Daly to start. She jumped up as if to fly, but Azemi implored her to remain and begged her to tell him what happened to them after the death of their lovers, and how they had come to find the dervish. "The punishment decreed to us by the Queen Okimpere," answered Deli, "was that we were to dance and sing in the midst of our sorrow, at a great fete, which was to be held that very day for all her people." This cruel command nearly turned our brains, and we swore a solemn oath to make all lovers as wretched as we were ourselves. In this design, we succeeded so well that in a short time the ladies of the capital came in a body to Okimpare and prayed her to banish us from the kingdom before their lives were made miserable forever. She consented and commanded us to be placed on board a ship with our slave Guluku. On the shore, we saw an old man who was busily engaged in drowning some little black pigs, talking to them all the while, as if they could understand him. "Accursed race," said he, "it is you who have caused all the misfortunes of him to whom I gave the magic bracelet. Perish, all of you." We drew near from curiosity and recognized in him the dervish who had sheltered us on our first escape from the caravan. When the old man discovered who we were, he was beside himself with pleasure and offered us a refuge in the cave where he lived. We gladly accepted his offer, and to the cave we all went, taking with us the last little pig, which he gave us as a present. "The Bassa of the sea," he added, "will pay you anything you like to ask for it." Without asking why it was so precious, I took the pig and placed it in my work bag, where it has been ever since. Only yesterday, we offered it to the Bassa, who laughed at us, and this so enraged us against the dervish that we cut off his beard when he was asleep, and now he dare not show himself. "Ah," exclaimed the page, "it is not fitting that such beauty should waste itself in making other people miserable. Forget the unhappy past and think only of the future. And accept, I pray you, this watch to mark the brighter hours in store." So saying, he laid the watch upon her knee. Then he turned to Tazila. "And you, fair maiden, permit me to offer you this other watch. True, it is only of silver, but it is all I have left to give. And I feel quite sure that you must have somewhere a silver seal that will be exactly the thing to go with it." "Why, so you have," cried Delhi. "Fasten your silver seal to your watch, and I will hang my gold one on to mine." The seals were produced, and, as Azemi had guessed, they were the talismans which the two Circassians had taken from Izif and Izuf, mounted in gold and silver. As quick as lightning, the watches slid from the hands of Tazila and her sister, and Aurora and Argentine stood before them, each with her talisman on her finger. At first, they seemed rather confused themselves at the change which had taken place, and the sunlight which they had not seen for so long. But when gradually they understood that their enchantment had come to an end, they could find no words to express their happiness. The Circassians could with difficulty be comforted for the loss of the talismans, but Aurora and Argentine entreated them to dry their tears, as their father, Sirocco, who was governor of Alexandria, would not fail to reward them in any manner they wished. This promise was soon confirmed by Sirocco himself, who came into the garden with the Bassa and his two sons, and was speedily joined by the ladies of the family. Only Hassan was absent. It was the hour in which he was condemned to bewail his ebony hand. To the surprise of all, a noise was at this moment heard in a corner of the terrace, and Hassan himself appeared surrounded by slaves, clapping his hands and shouting with joy. "I was weeping as usual," cried he, when all at once the tears refused to come to my eyes, and on looking down at my hand, I saw that its blackness had vanished. And now, lovely Zelida, nothing prevents me any longer from offering you the hand when the heart has been yours always. But though Hassan never thought of asking or caring what had caused his cure, the others were by no means so indifferent. It was quite clear that the little black pig must be dead. But how? And when? To this, the slaves answered that they had seen that morning a man pursued by 3 others, and that he had taken refuge in the cavern which they had been left to guard. Then, in obedience to orders, they had rolled a stone over the entrance. Piercing shrieks interrupted their story, and a man, whom the Circassians saw to be the old dervish, rushed round the corner of the terrace with the 3 Jews behind him. When the fugitive beheld so many people collected together, he turned down another path, but the slaves captured all 4 and brought them before their master. What was the surprise of the Bassa when he beheld in the old dervish the man who had given the chaplet, the copper plaque, and the bracelet to his 3 sons. "Fear nothing, Holy Father," he said. "You are safe with me. But tell us, how came you here, my lord?" explained the dervish. "When my beard was cut off during my sleep by the 2 Circassians, I was ashamed to appear before the eyes of men, and fled, bearing with me the pink silk bag. In the night, these 3 men fell in with me, and we passed some time in conversation. But at dawn, when it was light enough to see each other's faces, one of them exclaimed that I was the dervish traveling with the 2 Circassians who had stolen the talismans from the Jews. I jumped up and tried to fly to my cave, but they were too quick for me. And just as we reached your garden, they snatched the bag, which contained the little black pig, and flung it into the sea. By this act, which delivers your son, I would pray you to forgive them for any wrongs they may have done you, nay more, that you will recompense them for it." The Bassa granted the holy man's request, and seeing that the 2 Jews had fallen victims to the charms of the Circassian ladies, gave his consent to their union, which was fixed to take place at the same time as that of Izaf with the wise Sumi. The Qadi was sent for, and the Jews exchanged the hats of their race for the turbans of the followers of the Prophet. Then, after so many misfortunes, the Bassa's 3 sons entreated their father to delay their happiness no longer, and the 6 marriages were performed by the Qadi at the hour of noon. The Jackal and the Spring. Once upon a time, all the streams and rivers ran so dry that the animals did not know how to get water. After a very long search, which had been quite in vain, they found a tiny spring, which only wanted to be dug deeper so as to yield plenty of water. So the beasts said to each other, "Let us dig a well, and then we shall not fear to die of thirst." And they all consented, except the Jackal, who hated work of any kind, and generally got somebody to do it for him. When they had finished their well, they held a council as to who should be made the guardian of the well, so that the Jackal might not come near it. For they said, "He would not work. Therefore, he shall not drink." After some talk, it was decided that the rabbit should be left in charge. Then all the other beasts went back to their homes. When they were out of sight, the Jackal arrived. "Good morning. Good morning, Rabbit." And the rabbit politely said, "Good morning." Then the Jackal unfastened the little bag that hung at his side and pulled out of it a piece of honeycomb which he began to eat. And turning to the rabbit, he remarked, "As you see, Rabbit, I am not thirsty in the least, and this is nicer than any water. Give me a bit," asked the rabbit. So the Jackal handed him a very little morsel. "Oh, how good it is!" cried the rabbit. "Give me a little more, dear friend." But the Jackal answered, "If you really want me to give you some more, you must have your paws tied behind you and lie on your back so that I can pour it into your mouth." The rabbit did as he was bid, and when he was tied tight and popped on his back, the Jackal ran to the spring and drank as much as he wanted. When he had quite finished, he returned to his den. In the evening, the animals all came back, and when they saw the rabbit lying with his paws tied, they said to him, "Rabbit, how did you let yourself be taken in like this?" "It was all the fault of the Jackal," replied the rabbit. "He tied me up like this and told me he would give me something nice to eat. It was all a trick just to get at our water. Rabbit, you are no better than an idiot to have let the Jackal drink our water when he would not help to find it. Who shall be our next watchman? We must have somebody a little sharper than you." And the little hare called out, "I will be the watchman." The following morning, the animals all went their various ways, leaving the little hare to guard the spring. When they were out of sight, the Jackal came back. Good morning, little hare." And the little hare politely said, "Good morning. Can you give me a pinch of snuff?" said the Jackal. "I am so sorry, but I have none," answered the little hare. The Jackal then came and sat down by the little hare and unfastened his little bag, pulling out of it a piece of honeycomb. He licked his lips and exclaimed, "Oh, little hare, if you only knew how good it is." "What is it?" asked the little hare. "It is something that moistens my throat so deliciously," answered the jackal, "that after I have eaten it, I don't feel thirsty anymore, while I am sure that all you other beasts are forever wanting water." "Give me a bit, dear friend," asked the little hare. "Not so fast," replied the jackal. "If you really wish to enjoy what you are eating, you must have your paws tied behind you and lie on your back so that I can pour it into your mouth. You can tie them. Only be quick," said the little hare. And when he was tied tight and popped on his back, the jackal went quietly down to the well and drank as much as he wanted. When he had quite finished, he returned to his den. In the evening, the animals all came back, and when they saw the little hare with his paws tied, they said to him, "Little hare, how did you let yourself be taken in like this? Didn't you boast you were very sharp? You undertook to guard our water. Now show us how much is left for us to drink." "It is all the fault of the jackal," replied the little hare. "He told me he would give me something nice to eat if I would just let him tie my hands behind my back." Then the animals said, "Who can we trust to mount guard now?" And the panther answered, "Let it be the tortoise." The following morning, the animals all went their various ways, leaving the tortoise to guard the spring. When they were out of sight, the jackal came back. "Good morning, tortoise." "Good morning." But the tortoise took no notice. "Good morning, tortoise." "Good morning." But still the tortoise pretended not to hear. Then the jackal said to himself, "Well, today I have only got to manage a bigger idiot than before. I shall just kick him on one side and then go and have a drink." So he went up to the tortoise and said to him in a soft voice, "Tortoise, tortoise." But the tortoise took no notice. Then the jackal kicked him out of the way and went to the well and began to drink. But scarcely had he touched the water than the tortoise seized him by the leg. The jackal shrieked out, "Oh, you will break my leg!" But the tortoise only held on the tighter. The jackal then took his bag and tried to make the tortoise smell the honeycomb he had inside. But the tortoise turned away his head and smelt nothing. At last, the jackal said to the tortoise, "I should like to give you my bag and everything in it." But the only answer the tortoise made was to grasp the jackal's leg tighter still. So matters stood when the other animals came back. The moment he saw them, the jackal gave a violent tug and managed to free his leg, and then took to his heels as fast as he could. And the animals all said to the tortoise, "Well done, tortoise. You have proved your courage. Now we can drink from our well in peace, as you have got the better of that thieving jackal." The bear. Once on a time, there was a king who had an only daughter. He was so proud and so fond of her that he was in constant terror that something would happen to her if she went outside the palace. And thus, owing to his great love for her, he forced her to lead the life of a prisoner, shut up within her own rooms. The princess did not like this at all, and one day she complained about it very bitterly to her nurse. Now, the nurse was a witch, though the king did not know it. For some time she listened and tried to soothe the princess. But when she saw that she would not be comforted, she said to her, "Your father loves you very dearly, as you know. Whatever you were to ask from him, he would give you. The one thing he will not grant you is permission to leave the palace. Now, do as I tell you. Go to your father and ask him to give you a wooden wheelbarrow and a bear's skin. When you have got them, bring them to me, and I will touch them with my magic wand. The wheelbarrow will then move of itself and will take you at full speed wherever you want to go. And the bear's skin will make such a covering for you that no one will recognize you." So the princess did as the witch advised her. The king, when he heard her strange request, was greatly astonished and asked her what she meant to do with a wheelbarrow and a bear's skin. And the princess answered, "You never let me leave the house. At least you might grant me this request." So the king granted it, and the princess went back to her nurse, taking the barrow and the bear's skin with her. As soon as the witch saw them, she touched them with her magic wand, and in a moment, the barrow began to move about in all directions. The princess next put on the bear's skin, which so completely changed her appearance that no one could have known that she was a girl and not a bear. In this strange attire, she seated herself on the barrow, and in a few minutes, she found herself far away from the palace and moving rapidly through a great forest. Here she stopped the barrow with a sign that the witch had shown her, and hid herself and it in a thick grove of flowering shrubs. Now it happened that the prince of that country was hunting with his dogs in the forest. Suddenly, he caught sight of the bear hiding among the shrubs, and calling his dogs, hounded them on to attack it. But the girl, seeing what peril she was in, cried, "Call off your dogs, or they will kill me. What harm have I ever done to you?" At these words, coming from a bear, the prince was so startled that for a moment he stood stock still. Then he said, quite gently, "Will you come with me? I will take you to my home." "I will come gladly," replied the bear. And seating herself on the barrow, it at once began to move in the direction of the prince's palace. You may imagine the surprise of the prince's mother when she saw her son return, accompanied by a bear, who at once set about doing the housework better than any servant that the queen had ever seen. Now it happened that there were great festivities going on in the palace of a neighboring prince, and at dinner one day, the prince said to his mother, "This evening, there is to be a great ball, to which I must go." And his mother answered, "Go and dance, and enjoy yourself." Suddenly, a voice came from under the table, where the bear had rolled itself, as was its wont. Let me come to the ball. I, too, would like to dance." But the only answer the prince made was to give the bear a kick and to drive it out of the room. In the evening, the prince set off for the ball. As soon as he had started, the bear came to the queen and implored to be allowed to go to the ball, saying that she would hide herself so well that no one would know she was there. The kind-hearted queen could not refuse her. Then the bear ran to her barrow, threw off her bear's skin, and touched it with the magic wand that the witch had given her. In a moment, the skin was changed into an exquisite ball dress woven out of moonbeams, and the wheelbarrow was changed into a carriage drawn by 2 prancing steeds. Stepping into the carriage, the princess drove to the grand entrance of the palace. When she entered the ballroom, in her wondrous dress of moonbeams, she looked so lovely, so different from all the other guests, that everyone wondered who she was, and no one could tell where she had come from. From the moment he saw her, the prince fell desperately in love with her, and all the evening he would dance with no one else but the beautiful stranger. When the ball was over, the princess drove away in her carriage at full speed, for she wished to get home in time to change her ball dress into the bear's skin, and the carriage into the wheelbarrow, before anyone discovered who she was. The prince, putting spurs into his horse, rode after her, for he was determined not to let her out of his sight. But suddenly, a thick mist arose and hid her from him. When he reached his home, he could talk to his mother of nothing else but the beautiful stranger with whom he had danced so often, and with whom he was so much in love. And the bear beneath the table smiled to itself and muttered, "I am the beautiful stranger. Oh, how I have taken you in." The next evening, there was a second ball, and as you may believe, the prince was determined not to miss it, for he thought he would once more see the lovely girl and dance with her and talk to her and make her talk to him. For at the first ball, she had never opened her lips, and sure enough, as the music struck up the first dance, the beautiful stranger entered the room, looking even more radiant than the night before, for this time her dress was woven out of the rays of the sun. All evening, the prince danced with her, but she never spoke a word. When the ball was over, he tried once more to follow her carriage, that he might know whence she came. But suddenly, a great waterspout fell from the sky, and the blinding sheets of rain hid her from his sight. When he reached his home, he told his mother that he had again seen the lovely girl, and that this time she had been even more beautiful than the night before. And again the bear smiled beneath the table and muttered, "I have taken him in a second time, and he has no idea that I am the beautiful girl with whom he is so much in love. On the next evening, the prince returned to the palace for the third ball, and the princess went too. And this time, she had changed her bear's skin into a dress woven out of the starlight, studded all over with gems. And she looked so dazzling and so beautiful that everyone wondered at her and said that no one so beautiful had ever been seen before. And the prince danced with her, and though he could not induce her to speak, he succeeded in slipping a ring on her finger. When the ball was over, he followed her carriage and rode at such a pace that for long he kept it in sight. Then, suddenly, a terrible wind arose between him and the carriage, and he could not overtake it. When he reached his home, he said to his mother, "I do not know what is to become of me. I think I shall go mad. I am so much in love with that girl, and I have no means of finding out who she is. I danced with her, and I gave her a ring, and yet I do not know her name, nor where I am to find her." Then the bear laughed beneath the table and muttered to itself, and the prince continued, "I am tired to death. Order some soup to be made for me, but I don't want that bear to meddle with it. Every time I speak of my love, the brute mutters and laughs and seems to mock at me. I hate the sight of the creature." When the soup was ready, the bear brought it to the prince. But before handing it to him, she dropped into the plate the ring the prince had given her the night before at the ball. The prince began to eat his soup very slowly and languidly, for he was sad at heart, and all his thoughts were busy, wondering how and where he could see the lovely stranger again. Suddenly, he noticed the ring at the bottom of the plate. In a moment, he recognized it and was dumb with surprise. Then he saw the bear standing beside him, looking at him with gentle, beseeching eyes. And something in the eyes of the bear made him say, "Take off that skin. Some mystery is hidden beneath it." And the bear's skin dropped off, and the beautiful girl stood before him, in the dress woven out of the starlight. And he saw that she was the stranger with whom he had fallen so deeply in love. And now she appeared to him 1,000 times more beautiful than ever. And he led her to his mother, and the princess told them her story, and how she had been kept shut up by her father in his palace, and how she had wearied of her imprisonment. And the prince's mother loved her, and rejoiced that her son should have so good and beautiful a wife. So they were married, and lived happily for many years, and reigned wisely over their kingdom. The Sunchild. Once there was a woman who had no children, and this made her very unhappy. So she spoke one day to the Sunball, saying, "Dear Sunball, send me only a little girl now, and when she is 12 years old, you may take her back again." So soon after this, the sunball sent her a little girl, whom the woman called Letiko, and watched over with great care till she was 12 years old. Soon after that, while Letiko was away one day gathering herbs, the sunball came to her and said, "Letiko, when you go home, tell your mother that she must bethink herself of what she promised me." Then Letiko went straight home and said to her mother, "While I was gathering herbs, a fine tall gentleman came to me and charged me to tell you that you should remember what you promised him." When the woman heard that, she was sore afraid, and immediately shut all the doors and windows of the house, stopped up all the chinks and holes, and kept Letiko hidden away, that the sunball should not come and take her away. But she forgot to close up the keyhole, and through it the sunball sent a ray into the house, which took hold of the little girl and carried her away to him. One day, the sunball having sent her to the straw shed to fetch straw, the girl sat down on the piles of straw and bemoaned herself, saying, "As sighs this straw under my feet, so sighs my heart after my mother." And this caused her to be so long away that the sunball asked her, when she came back, Letiko, where have you been so long?" She answered, "My slippers are too big, and I could not go faster." Then the sunball made the slippers shorter. Another time he sent her to fetch water. And when she came to the spring, she sat down and lamented, saying, "As flows the water, even so flows my heart, with longing for my mother." Thus she again remained so long away that the sunball asked her, Letiko, why have you remained so long away?" And she answered, "My petticoat is too long and hinders me in walking." Then the sunball cut her petticoat to make it shorter. Another time, the sunball sent her to bring him a pair of sandals, and as the girl carried these in her hand, she began to lament, saying, "As creaks the leather, so creaks my heart after my little mother." When she came home, the sunball asked her again, "Letiko, why do you come home so late? My red hood is too wide and falls over my eyes, therefore I could not go fast." Then he made the hood narrower. At last, however, the sunball became aware how sad Letiko was. He sent her a second time to bring straw, and, slipping in after her, he heard how she lamented for her mother. Then he went home, called 2 foxes to him, and said, "Will you take Letiko home?" "Yes, why not? But what will you eat and drink if you should become hungry and thirsty, by the way?" "We will eat her flesh and drink her blood." When the sunball heard that, he said, "You are not suited for this affair." Then he sent them away, and called 2 hares to him, and said, "Will you take Letiko home to her mother?" "Yes, why not? What will you eat and drink if you should become hungry and thirsty, by the way?" "We will eat grass and drink from streamlets." "Then take her and bring her home." Then the hares set out, taking Letiko with them. and because it was a long way to her home, they became hungry by the way. Then they said to the little girl, "Climb this tree, dear Letiko, and remain there till we have finished eating." So Letiko climbed the tree, and the hares went grazing. It was not very long, however, before a lamia came under the tree and called out, "Letiko, Letiko, come down and see what beautiful shoes I have on." "Oh, my shoes are much finer than yours. Come down. I am in a hurry, for my house is not yet swept. Go home and sweep it then, and come back when you are ready." Then the lamia went away and swept her house. And when she was ready, she came back and called out, "Letiko, Letiko, come down and see what a beautiful apron I have. Oh, my apron is much finer than yours. If you will not come down, I will cut down the tree and eat you. Do so, and then eat me." Then the lamia hewed with all her strength at the tree, but could not cut it down. And when she saw that, she called out, "Letiko, Letiko, come down, for I must feed my children." "Go home then and feed them, and come back when you are ready." When the lamia was gone away, Letiko called out, "Little hares, little hares." Then said one hare to the other, "Listen, Letiko is calling." And they both ran back to her as fast as they could go. Then Letiko came down from the tree, and they went on their way. The lamia ran as fast as she could after them, to catch them up. And when she came to a field where people were working, she asked them, "Have you seen anyone pass this way?" They answered, "We are planting beans." "Oh, I did not ask about that, but if anyone had passed this way." But the people only answered the louder, "Are you deaf? It is beans, beans, beans we are planting." When Letiko had nearly reached her home, the dog knew her and called out, "Bow, wow! See, here comes Letiko." And the mother said, "Hush, thou beast of ill omen. Wilt thou make me burst with misery?" Next, the cat on the roof saw her and called out, "Meow, meow! See, here comes Letiko." And the mother said, "Keep silence, thou beast of ill omen. Wilt thou make me burst with misery?" Then the cock spied and called out, "Cock-a-doodle-doo! See, here comes Letiko." And the mother said again, "Be quiet, thou bird of ill omen. Wilt thou make me burst with misery?" The nearer Letiko and the two hares came to the house, the nearer also came the lamia. And when the hare was about to slip in by the house door, she caught it by its little tail and tore it out. When the hare came in, the mother stood up and said to it, "Welcome, dear little hare. Because you have brought me back, Letiko, I will silver your little tail." And she did so, and lived ever after with her daughter in happiness and content. The Daughter of Buk Ettemsuch. Once upon a time, there lived a man who had 7 daughters. For a long time, they dwelt quite happily at home together. Then, one morning, the father called them all before him and said, "Your mother and I are going on a journey, and as we do not know how long we may be away, you will find enough provisions in the house to last you 3 years. But see, you do not open the door to anyone till we come home again." "Very well, dear father," replied the girls. For 2 years, they never left the house or unlocked the door. But one day, when they had washed their clothes and were spreading them out on the roof to dry, the girls looked down into the street where people were walking to and fro, and across to the market, with its stalls of fresh meat, vegetables, and other nice things. "Come here," cried one. "It makes me quite hungry. Why should not we have our share? Let one of us go to the market and buy meat and vegetables." "Oh, we mustn't do that," said the youngest. "You know our father forbade us to open the door till he came home again." Then the eldest sister sprang at her and struck her. The second spit at her. The third abused her. The fourth pushed her. The fifth flung her to the ground. And the sixth tore her clothes. Then they left her lying on the floor and went out with a basket. In about an hour, they came back with the basket full of meat and vegetables, which they put in a pot and set on the fire, quite forgetting that the house door stood wide open. The youngest sister, however, took no part in all this, and when dinner was ready and the table laid, she stole softly out to the entrance hall and hid herself behind a great cask which stood in one corner. Now, while the other sisters were enjoying their feast, a witch passed by, and catching sight of the open door, she walked in. She went up to the eldest girl and said, "Where shall I begin on you, you fat bolster?" "You must begin," answered she, "with the hand which struck my little sister." So the witch gobbled her up, and when the last scrap had disappeared, she came to the second and asked, "Where shall I begin on you, my fat bolster?" And the second answered, "You must begin on my mouth, which spat on my sister," and so on to the rest. And very soon, the whole 6 had disappeared. And as the witch was eating the last mouthful of the last sister, the youngest, who had been crouching, frozen with horror, behind the barrel, ran out through the open door into the street. Without looking behind her, she hastened on and on, as fast as her feet would carry her, till she saw an ogre's castle standing in front of her. In a corner near the door, she spied a large pot, and she crept softly up to it and pulled the cover over it and went to sleep. By and by, the ogre came home. "Fee, fo, fum," cried he. "I smell the smell of a man. What ill fate has brought him here?" And he looked through all the rooms and found nobody. "Where are you?" he called. "Do not be afraid. I will do you no harm." But the girl was still silent. "Come out, I tell you," repeated the ogre. "Your life is quite safe. If you are an old man, you shall be my father. If you are a boy, you shall be my son. If your years are as many as mine, you shall be my brother. If you are an old woman, you shall be my mother. If you are a young one, you shall be my daughter. If you are middle-aged, you shall be my wife. So come out and fear nothing." Then the maiden came out of her hiding place and stood before him. "Fear nothing," said the ogre again. And when he went away to hunt, he left her to look after the house. In the evening, he returned, bringing with him hares, partridges, and gazelles for the girl's supper. For himself, he only cared for the flesh of men, which she cooked for him. He also gave into her charge the keys of 6 rooms, but the key of the 7th he kept himself. And time passed on, and the girl and the ogre still lived together. She called him father, and he called her daughter, and never once did he speak roughly to her. One day the maiden said to him, "Father, give me the key of the upper chamber." "No, my daughter," replied the ogre. "There is nothing there that is any use to you." "But I want the key," she repeated again. However, the ogre took no notice and pretended not to hear. The girl began to cry and said to herself, "Tonight, when he thinks I am asleep, I will watch and see where he hides it." And after she and the ogre had supped, she bade him good night and left the room. In a few minutes, she stole quietly back and watched from behind a curtain. In a little while, she saw the ogre take the key from his pocket and hide it in a hole in the ground before he went to bed. And when all was still, she took out the key and went back to the house. The next morning, the ogre awoke with the first ray of light, and the first thing he did was to look for the key. It was gone, and he guessed at once what had become of it. But instead of getting into a great rage, as most ogres would have done, he said to himself, "If I wake the maiden up, I shall only frighten her. For today she shall keep the key, and when I return tonight, it will be time enough to take it from her." So he went off to hunt. The moment he was safe out of the way, the girl ran upstairs and opened the door of the room, which was quite bare. The one window was closed, and she threw back the lattice and looked out. Beneath lay a garden which belonged to the prince, and in the garden was an ox who was drawing up water from the well all by himself, for there was nobody to be seen anywhere. The ox raised his head at the noise the girl made in opening the lattice, and said to her, "Good morning, O Daughter of Buk Ettemsuch. Your father is feeding you up till you are nice and fat, and then he will put you on a spit and cook you." These words so frightened the maiden that she burst into tears and ran out of the room. All day she wept. And when the ogre came home at night, no supper was ready for him. "What are you crying for?" said he. "Where is my supper? And is it you who have opened the upper chamber?" "Yes, I opened it," answered she. "And what did the ox say to you?" He said, "Good morning, O daughter of Buk Ettemsuch. Your father is feeding you up till you are nice and fat. And then he will put you on a spit and cook you. Well, tomorrow you can go to the window and say, 'My father is feeding me up till I am nice and fat. But he does not mean to eat me. If I had one of your eyes, I would use it for a mirror, and look at myself before and behind. And your girths should be loosened, and you should be blind 7 days and 7 nights." "All right," replied the girl. And the next morning, when the ox spoke to her, she answered him as she had been told, and he fell down straight upon the ground and lay there 7 days and 7 nights. But the flowers in the garden withered, for there was no one to water them. When the prince came into his garden, he found nothing but yellow stalks. In the midst of them, the ox was lying. With a blow from his sword, he killed the animal. And turning to his attendants, he said, "Go and fetch another ox." And they brought in a great beast, and he drew the water out of the well, and the flowers revived, and the grass grew green again. Then the prince called his attendants and went away. The next morning, the girl heard the noise of the water wheel, and she opened the lattice and looked out of the window. "Good morning, O daughter of Buk Ettemsuch," said the new ox. "Your father is feeding you up till you are nice and fat, and then he will put you on a spit and cook you." And the maiden answered, "My father is feeding me up till I am nice and fat, but he does not mean to eat me. If I had one of your eyes, I would use it for a mirror, and look at myself before and behind. And your girths should be loosened, and you should be blind 7 days and 7 nights." Directly she uttered these words, the ox fell to the ground and lay there 7 days and 7 nights. Then he arose and began to draw the water from the well. He had only turned the wheel once or twice, when the prince took it into his head to visit his garden and see how the new ox was getting on. When he entered, the ox was working busily, but in spite of that, the flowers and grass were dried up. And the prince drew his sword and rushed at the ox to slay him, as he had done the other. But the ox fell on his knees and said, "My lord, only spare my life and let me tell you how it happened." "How, what happened?" asked the prince. "My lord, a girl looked out of that window and spoke a few words to me, and I fell to the ground. For 7 days and 7 nights I lay there, unable to move. But, O my lord, it is not given to us twice to behold beauty such as hers." "It is a lie," said the prince. "An ogre dwells there. Is it likely that he keeps a maiden in his upper chamber?" "Why not?" replied the ox. "But if you come here at dawn tomorrow, and hide behind that tree. You will see for yourself." "So I will," said the prince. "And if I find that you have not spoken truth, I will kill you." The prince left the garden, and the ox went on with his work. Next morning, the prince came early to the garden and found the ox busy with the water wheel. "Has the girl appeared yet?" he asked. "Not yet, but she will not be long. Hide yourself in the branches of that tree, and you will soon see her." The prince did as he was told, and scarcely was he seated when the maiden threw open the lattice. "Good morning, O daughter of Buk Ettemsuch," said the ox. "Your father is feeding you up till you are nice and fat, and then he will put you on a spit and cook you." "My father is feeding me up till I am nice and fat, but he does not mean to eat me. If I had one of your eyes, I would use it for a mirror and look at myself before and behind, and your girths should be loosened, and you should be blind 7 days and 7 nights." And hardly had she spoken when the ox fell on the ground, and the maiden shut the lattice and went away. But the prince knew that what the ox had said was true, and that she had not her equal in the whole world. And he came down from the tree, his heart burning with love. "Why has the ogre not eaten her?" thought he. "This night I will invite him to supper in my palace and question him about the maiden, and find out if she is his wife." So the prince ordered a great ox to be slain and roasted whole, and 2 huge tanks to be made, one filled with water and the other with wine. And towards evening he called his attendants and went to the ogre's house to wait in the courtyard till he came back from hunting. The ogre was surprised to see so many people assembled in front of his house, but he bowed politely and said, "Good morning, dear neighbors. To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit? I have not offended you, I hope." "Oh, certainly not," answered the prince. "Then," continued the ogre, "what has brought you to my house today for the first time?" "We should like to have supper with you," said the prince. "Well, supper is ready, and you are welcome," replied the ogre, leading the way into the house, for he had had a good day, and there was plenty of game in the bag over his shoulder. A table was quickly prepared, and the prince had already taken his place, when he suddenly exclaimed, "After all, Buk Ettemsuch, suppose you come to supper with me." "Where?" asked the ogre. "In my house. I know it is all ready, but it is so far off. Why not stay here?" "Oh, I will come another day, but this evening I must be your host." So the ogre accompanied the prince and his attendants back to the palace. After a while, the prince turned to the ogre and said, "It is as a wooer that I appear before you. I seek a wife from an honorable family, but I have no daughter," replied the ogre. "Oh, yes, you have. I saw her at the window." "Well, you can marry her if you wish," said he. So the prince's heart was glad as he and his attendants rode back with the ogre to his house. And as they parted, the prince said to his guest, You will not forget the bargain we have made. I am not a young man, and never break my promises, said the ogre, and went in and shut the door. Upstairs, he found the maiden, waiting till he returned to have her supper, for she did not like eating by herself. I have had my supper, said the ogre, for I have been spending the evening with the prince. Where did you meet him? Asked the girl. Oh, we are neighbors, and grew up together. And tonight, I promised that you should be his wife. I don't want to be any man's wife, answered she. But this was only pretense, for her heart too was glad. Next morning, early came the prince, bringing with him bridal gifts and splendid wedding garments to carry the maiden back to his palace. But before he let her go, the ogre called her to him and said, Be careful, girl, never to speak to the prince, and when he speaks to you, you must be dumb, unless he swears by the head of Buk Ettemsuch. Then you may speak. Very well, answered the girl. They set out, and when they reached the palace, the prince led his bride to the room he had prepared for her, and said, Speak to me, my wife. But she was silent, and by he left her, thinking that perhaps she was shy. The next day, the same thing happened, and the next. At last he said, Well, if you won't speak, I shall go and get another wife who will. And he did. Now, when the new wife was brought to the palace, the daughter of Buk Ettemsuch rose and spoke to the ladies who had come to attend on the second bride. Go and sit down. I will make ready the feast. And the ladies sat down as they were told, and waited. The maiden sat down too, and called out, Come here, firewood. And the firewood came. Come here, fire. And the fire came, and kindled the wood. Come here, pot. Come here, oil. And the pot and the oil came. Get into the pot, oil, said she, and the oil did it. When the oil was boiling, the maiden dipped all her fingers in it, and they became 10 fried fishes. Come here, oven, she cried next, and the oven came. Fire, heat the oven. And the fire heated it. When it was hot enough, the maiden jumped in, just as she was, with her beautiful silver and gold dress, and all her jewels. In a minute or two, she had turned into a snow-white loaf that made your mouth water. Said the loaf to the ladies, You can eat now. Do not stand so far off. But they only stared at each other, speechless with surprise. What are you staring at? Asked the new bride. At all these wonders, replied the ladies. Do you call these wonders? Said she scornfully. I can do that too. And she jumped straight into the oven and was burnt up in a moment. Then they ran to the prince and said, Come quickly, your wife is dead. Bury her then, returned he. But why did she do it? I am sure I said nothing to make her throw herself into the oven. Accordingly, the burnt woman was buried. But the prince would not go to the funeral, as all his thoughts were still with the wife who would not speak to him. The next night, he said to her, "Dear wife, are you afraid that something dreadful will happen if you speak to me? If you still persist in being dumb, I shall be forced to get another wife." The poor girl longed to speak, but dread of the ogre kept her silent. And the prince did as he had said, and brought a fresh bride into the palace. And when she and her ladies were seated in state, the maiden planted a sharp stake in the ground and sat herself down comfortably on it and began to spin. "What are you staring at so?" said the new bride to her ladies. "Do you think that is anything wonderful? Why, I can do as much myself." "I am sure you can't," said they, much too surprised to be polite. Then the maid sprang off the stake and left the room. And instantly, the new wife took her place. But the sharp stake ran through, and she was dead in a moment. So they sent to the prince and said, "Come quickly and bury your wife." "Bury her yourselves," he answered. "What did she do it for? It was not by my orders that she impaled herself on the stake." So they buried her. And in the evening, the prince came to the daughter of Buk Ettemsuch and said to her, "Speak to me, or I shall have to take another wife." But she was afraid to speak to him. The following day, the prince hid himself in the room and watched. And soon the maiden woke and said to the pitcher and to the water jug, "Quick, go down to the spring and bring me some water. I am thirsty." And they went. But as they were filling themselves at the spring, the water jug knocked against the pitcher and broke off its spout. And the pitcher burst into tears and ran to the maiden and said, "Mistress, beat the water jug, for he has broken my spout." "By the head of Buk Ettemsuch, I implore you not to beat me." "Ah," she replied, "if only my husband had sworn by that oath, I could have spoken to him from the beginning, and he need never have taken another wife. But now he will never say it, and he will have to go on marrying fresh ones." And the prince, from his hiding place, heard her words, and he jumped up and ran to her and said, "By the head of Buk Ettemsuch, speak to me." So she spoke to him, and they lived happily to the end of their days, because the girl kept the promise she had made to the ogre. Laughing Eye and Weeping Eye, or the Limping Fox, Servian story. Once upon a time, there lived a man whose right eye always smiled, and whose left eye always cried. And this man had 3 sons, 2 of them very clever, and the third very stupid. Now these 3 sons were very curious about the peculiarity of their father's eyes, and as they could not puzzle out the reason for themselves, they determined to ask their father why he did not have eyes like other people. So the eldest of the 3 went one day into his father's room and put the question straight out. But instead of answering, the man flew into a fearful rage and sprang at him with a knife. The young fellow ran away in a terrible fright and took refuge with his brothers, who were awaiting anxiously the result of the interview. "You had better go yourselves," was all the reply they got, "and see if you will fare any better." Upon hearing this, the second son entered his father's room, only to be treated in the same manner as his brother. And back he came, telling the youngest, the fool of the family, that it was his turn to try his luck. Then the youngest son marched boldly up to his father and said to him, "My brothers would not let me know what answer you had given to their question. But now, do tell me why your right eye always laughs and your left eye always weeps." As before, the father grew purple with fury and rushed forwards with his knife. But the simpleton did not stir a step. He knew that he had really nothing to fear from his father. "Ah, now I see who is my true son," exclaimed the old man. "The others are mere cowards. And as you have shown me that you are brave, I will satisfy your curiosity. My right eye laughs because I am glad to have a son like you. My left eye weeps because a precious treasure has been stolen from me. I had in my garden a vine that yielded a ton of wine every hour. Someone has managed to steal it, so I weep its loss." The simpleton returned to his brothers and told them of their father's loss, and they all made up their minds to set out at once in search of the vine. They traveled together till they came to some crossroads, and there they parted, the two elder ones taking one road, and the simpleton the other. "Thank goodness we have got rid of that idiot," exclaimed the two elder. "Now, let us have some breakfast." And they sat down by the roadside and began to eat. They had only half finished when a lame fox came out of a wood and begged them to give him something to eat. But they jumped up and chased him off with their sticks, and the poor fox limped away on his 3 pads. As he ran, he reached the spot where the youngest son was getting out the food he had brought with him, and the fox asked him for a crust of bread. The simpleton had not very much for himself, but he gladly gave half of his meal to the hungry fox. "Where are you going, brother?" said the fox, when he had finished his share of the bread. And the young man told him the story of his father and the wonderful vine. "Dear me, how lucky," said the fox. "I know what has become of it. Follow me." So they went on till they came to the gate of a large garden. "You will find here the vine that you are seeking, but it will not be at all easy to get it. You must listen carefully to what I am going to say. Before you reach the vine, you will have to pass 12 outposts, each consisting of 2 guards. If you see these guards looking straight at you, go on without fear, for they are asleep. But if their eyes are shut, then beware, for they are wide awake. If you once get to the vine, you will find 2 shovels, one of wood and the other of iron. Be sure not to take the iron one. It will make a noise and rouse the guards, and then you are lost. The young man got safely through the garden without any adventures till he came to the vine which yielded a ton of wine an hour. But he thought he should find it impossible to dig the hard earth with only a wooden shovel, so picked up the iron one instead. The noise it made soon awakened the guards. They seized the poor simpleton and carried him to their master. "Why do you try to steal my vine?" demanded he. "And how did you manage to get past the guards?" "The vine is not yours. It belongs to my father. And if you will not give it to me now, I will return and get it somehow." "You shall have the vine if you will bring me in exchange an apple off the golden apple tree that flowers every 24 hours and bears fruit of gold." So saying, he gave orders that the simpleton should be released. And this done, the youth hurried off to consult the fox. "Now you see," observed the fox, "this comes of not following my advice. However, I will help you to get the golden apple. It grows in a garden that you will easily recognize from my description. Near the apple tree are 2 poles, one of gold, the other of wood. Take the wooden pole, and you will be able to reach the apple." Master Simpleton listened carefully to all that was told him, and after crossing the garden and escaping as before from the men who were watching it, soon arrived at the apple tree. But he was too dazzled by the sight of the beautiful golden fruit that he quite forgot all that the fox had said. He seized the golden pole and struck the branch a sounding blow. The guards at once awoke and conducted him to their master. Then the simpleton had to tell his story. "I will give you the golden apple," said the owner of the garden, "if you will bring me in exchange a horse which can go round the world in 24 hours." And the young man departed and went to find the fox. This time the fox was really angry, and no wonder. "If you had listened to me, you would have been home with your father by this time. However, I am willing to help you once more. Go into the forest, and you will find the horse with 2 halters round his neck. One is of gold, the other of hemp. Lead him by the hempen halter, or else the horse will begin to neigh and will waken the guards. Then all is over with you." So Master Simpleton searched till he found the horse and was struck dumb at its beauty. "What?" he said to himself. "Put the hempen halter on an animal like that? Not I? Indeed." Then the horse neighed loudly. The guards seized our young friend and conducted him before their master. "I will give you the golden horse," said he, "if you will bring me in exchange a golden maiden who has never yet seen either sun or moon. But if I am to bring you the golden maiden, you must lend me first the golden steed with which to seek for her." "Ah," replied the owner of the golden horse, "but who will undertake that you will ever come back?" "I swear on the head of my father," answered the young man, "that I will bring back either the maiden or the horse." And he went away to consult the fox. Now, the fox, who was always patient and charitable to other people's faults, led him to the entrance of a deep grotto, where stood a maiden, all of gold and beautiful as the day. He placed her on his horse and prepared to mount. "Are you not sorry," said the fox, "to give such a lovely maiden in exchange for a horse? Yet you are bound to do it, for you have sworn by the head of your father. But perhaps I could manage to take her place." So saying, the fox transformed himself into another golden maiden, so like the first that hardly anyone could tell the difference between them. The simpleton took her straight to the owner of the horse, who was enchanted with her, and the young man got back his father's vine and married the real golden maiden into the bargain. The Unlooked-for Prince. Polish story. A long time ago, there lived a king and queen who had no children, although they both wished very much for a little son. They tried not to let each other see how unhappy they were, and pretended to take pleasure in hunting and hawking and all sorts of other sports. But at length, the king could bear it no longer, and declared that he must go and visit the furthest corners of his kingdom, and that it would be many months before he should return to his capital. By that time, he hoped he would have so many things to think about that he would have forgotten to trouble about the little son who never came. The country the king reigned over was very large and full of high, stony mountains and sandy deserts, so that it was not at all easy to go from one place to another. One day, the king had wandered out alone, meaning to go only a little distance, but everything looked so alike he could not make out the path by which he had come. He walked on and on for hours, the sun beating hotly on his head, and his legs trembling under him, and he might have died of thirst if he had not suddenly stumbled on a little well, which looked as if it had been newly dug. On the surface floated a silver cup with a golden handle, but as it bobbed about whenever the king tried to seize it, he was too thirsty to wait any longer, and knelt down and drank his fill. When he had finished, he began to rise from his knees, but somehow his beard seemed to have stuck fast in the water, and with all his efforts, he could not pull it out. After 2 or 3 jerks to his head, which only hurt him without doing any good, he called out angrily, "Let go at once! Who is holding me?" "It is I, the King Kostiei," said a voice from the well. And looking up through the water was a little man with green eyes and a big head. "You have drunk from my spring, and I shall not let you go until you promise to give me the most precious thing your palace contains, which was not there when you left it." Now the only thing that the king much cared for in his palace was the queen herself. And as she was weeping bitterly on a pile of cushions in the great hall when he had ridden away, he knew that Kostie's words could not apply to her. So he cheerfully gave the promise asked for by the ugly little man. And in the twinkling of an eye, man, spring, and cup had disappeared, and the king was left kneeling on the dry sand, wondering if it was all a dream. But as he felt much stronger and better, he made up his mind that this strange adventure must really have happened, and he sprang on his horse and rode off with a light heart to look for his companions. In a few weeks, they began to set out on their return home, which they reached one hot day, 8 months after they had all left. The king was greatly beloved by his people, and crowds lined the roads, shouting and waving their hats as the procession passed along. On the steps of the palace stood the queen, with a splendid golden cushion in her arms, and on the cushion the most beautiful boy that ever was seen, wrapped about in a cloud of lace. In a moment, Kostie's words rushed into the king's mind, and he began to weep bitterly, to the surprise of everybody, who had expected him nearly to die of joy at the sight of his son. But try as he would, and work as hard as he might, he could never forget his promise, and every time he let the baby out of his sight, he thought that he had seen it for the last time. However, years passed on, and the prince grew first into a big boy, and then into a fine young man. Kostie made no sign, and gradually even the anxious king thought less and less about him, and in the end forgot him altogether. There was no family in the whole kingdom happier than the king and queen and prince, until one day when the youth met a little old man as he was hunting in a lonely part of the woods. "How are you, my unlooked-for prince?" he said. "You kept them waiting a good long time." "And who are you?" asked the prince. "You will know soon enough. When you go home, give my compliments to your father, and tell him that I wish he would square accounts with me. If he neglects to pay his debts, he will bitterly repent it." So saying, the old man disappeared, and the prince returned to the palace and told his father what had happened. The king turned pale and explained to his son the terrible story. "Do not grieve over it, father," answered the prince. "It is nothing so dreadful after all. I will find some way to force Kostie to give up his rights over me. But if I do not come back in a year's time, you must give up all hopes of ever seeing me." Then the prince began to prepare for his journey. His father gave him a complete suit of steel armor, a sword, and a horse, while his mother hung round his neck a cross of gold. So, kissing him tenderly, with many tears, they let him go. He rode steadily on for 3 days, and at sunset on the 4th day, he found himself on the seashore. On the sand before him lay 12 white dresses, dazzling as the snow. Yet as far as his eyes could reach, there was no one in sight to whom they could belong. Curious to see what would happen, he took up one of the garments, and leaving his horse loose, to wander about the adjoining fields, he hid himself among some willows and waited. In a few minutes, a flock of geese, which had been paddling about in the sea, approached the shore and put on the dresses, struck the sand with their feet, and were transformed in the twinkling of an eye into 11 beautiful young girls, who flew away as fast as they could. The 12th and youngest remained in the water, stretching out her long white neck and looking about her anxiously. Suddenly, among the willows, she perceived the king's son, and called out to him with a human voice, "O Prince, give me back my dress, and I shall be forever grateful to you." The prince hastened to lay the dress on the sand and walked away. When the maiden had thrown off the goose skin and quickly put on her proper clothes, she came towards him, and he saw that none had ever seen or told of such beauty as hers. She blushed and held out her hand, saying to him in a soft voice, "I thank you, noble prince, for having granted my request. I am the youngest daughter of Koste the Immortal, who has 12 daughters and rules over the kingdoms under the earth. Long time my father has waited for you, and great is his anger. But trouble not yourself, and fear nothing. Only do as I bid you. When you see the king Kostié, fall straightway upon your knees, and heed neither his threats nor his cry, but draw near to him boldly. That which will happen after, you will know in time. Now let us go." At these words, she struck the ground with her foot, and a gulf opened, down which they went right into the heart of the earth. In a short time, they reached Kostié's palace, which gives light, with a light brighter than the sun, to the dark kingdoms below. And the prince, as he had been bidden, entered boldly into the hall. Kostié, with a shining crown upon his head, sat in the center upon a golden throne. His green eyes glittered like glass. His hands were as the claws of a crab. When he caught sight of the prince, he uttered piercing yells, which shook the walls of the palace. The prince took no notice, but continued his advance on his knees towards the throne. When he had almost reached it, the king broke out into a laugh and said, "It has been very lucky for you that you have been able to make me laugh. Stay with us in our underground empire. Only first, you will have to do 3 things. Tonight, it is late. Go to sleep. Tomorrow, I will tell you." Early the following morning, the prince received a message that Kostié was ready to see him. He got up and dressed, and hastened to the presence chamber, where the little king was seated on his throne. When the prince appeared, bowing low before him, Costier began, "Now, prince, this is what you have to do. By tonight, you must build me a marble palace with windows of crystal and a roof of gold. It is to stand in the middle of a great park full of streams and lakes. If you are able to build it, you shall be my friend. If not, off with your head." The prince listened in silence to this startling speech, and then returning to his room, set himself to think about the certain death that awaited him. He was quite absorbed in these thoughts when suddenly a bee flew against the window and tapped, saying, "Let me come in." He rose and opened the window, and there stood before him the youngest princess. "What are you dreaming about, Prince?" "I was dreaming of your father, who has planned my death. Fear nothing. You may sleep in peace, and tomorrow morning, when you awake, you will find the palace all ready." What she said, she did. The next morning, when the prince left his room, he saw before him a palace more beautiful than his fancy had ever pictured. Costier, for his part, could hardly believe his eyes, and pondered deeply how it had got there. "Well, this time you have certainly won, but you are not going to be let off so easily. Tomorrow, all my 12 daughters shall stand in a row before you, and if you cannot tell me which of them is the youngest, off goes your head." "What? Not recognize the youngest princess?" said the prince to himself as he entered his room. "A likely story. It is such a difficult matter that you will never be able to do it without my help," replied the bee, who was buzzing about the ceiling. "We are all so exactly alike that even our father scarcely knows the difference between us. Then what must I do? This. The youngest is she who will have a ladybird on her eyelid. Be very careful. Now, goodbye." Next morning, King Costier again sent for the prince. The young princesses were all drawn up in a row, dressed precisely in the same manner, and with their eyes cast down. As the prince looked at them, he was amazed at their likeness. Twice he walked along the line without being able to detect the sign agreed upon. The third time, his heart beat fast at the sight of a tiny speck upon the eyelid of one of the girls. "This one is the youngest," he said. "How in the world did you guess?" cried Costier in a fury. "There is some jugglery about it, but you are not going to escape me so easily. In 3 hours, you shall come here and give me another proof of your cleverness. I shall set alight a handful of straw, and before it is burnt up, you will have turned it into a pair of boots. If not, off goes your head." So the prince returned sadly into his room, but the bee was there before him. "Why do you look so melancholy, my handsome prince? How can I help looking melancholy when your father has ordered me to make him a pair of boots? Does he take me for a shoemaker? What do you think of doing? Not of making boots, at any rate. I am not afraid of death. One can only die once, after all. No, Prince, you shall not die. I will try to save you, and we will fly together, or die together. As she spoke, she spat upon the ground, and then drawing the prince after her out of the room, she locked the door behind her and threw away the key. Holding each other tight by the hand, they made their way up into the sunlight and found themselves by the side of the same sea, while the prince's horse was still quietly feeding in the neighboring meadow. The moment he saw his master, the horse whinnied and galloped towards him. Without losing an instant, the prince sprang into the saddle, swung the princess behind him, and away they went, like an arrow from a bow. When the hour arrived, which Costier had fixed for the prince's last trial, and there were no signs of him, the king sent to his room to ask why he delayed so long. The servants, finding the door locked, knocked loudly and received for answer. In one moment, it was the spittle which was imitating the voice of the prince. The answer was taken back to Costier. He waited. Still no prince. He sent the servants back again, and the same voice replied, immediately. "He is making fun of me!" shrieked Costier in a rage. "Break in the door and bring him to me!" The servants hurried to do his bidding. The door was broken open. Nobody inside, but just the spittle in fits of laughter. Costier was beside himself with rage and commanded his guards to ride after the fugitives. If the guards returned without the fugitives, their heads should pay for it. By this time, the prince and princess had got a good start and were feeling quite happy, when suddenly they heard the sound of a gallop far behind them. The prince sprang from the saddle and laid his ear to the ground. "They are pursuing us," he said. "Then there is no time to be lost," answered the princess. And as she spoke, she changed herself into a river, the prince into a bridge, the horse into a crow, and divided the wide road beyond the bridge into 3 little ones. When the soldiers came up to the bridge, they paused uncertainly. How were they to know which of the 3 roads the fugitives had taken? They gave it up in despair and returned in trembling to Costier. "Idiots!" he exclaimed in a passion. "They were the bridge and the river, of course. Do you mean to say you never thought of that? Go back at once." And off they galloped like lightning. But time had been lost, and the prince and princess were far on their way. "I hear a horse!" cried the princess. The prince jumped down and laid his ear to the ground. "Yes," he said, "they are not far off now." In an instant, prince, princess, and horse had all disappeared, and instead was a dense forest, crossed and recrossed by countless paths. Kostei's soldiers dashed hastily into the forest, believing they saw before them the flying horse with its double burden. They seemed close upon them, when suddenly horse, wood, everything disappeared, and they found themselves at the place where they started. There was nothing for it but to return to Kostei and tell him of this fresh disaster. "A horse! A horse!" cried the king. "I will go after them myself. This time they shall not escape." And he galloped off, foaming with anger. "I think I hear someone pursuing us," said the princess. "Yes, so do I. And this time it is Kostei himself. But his power only reaches as far as the first church, and he can go no farther. Give me your golden cross." So the prince unfastened the cross, which was his mother's gift, and the princess hastily changed herself into a church, the prince into a priest, and the horse into a belfry. It was hardly done when Kostei came up. "Greeting, monk. Have you seen some travelers on horseback pass this way?" "Yes, the prince and Kostei's daughter have just gone by. They have entered the church and told me to give you their greetings if I met you." Then Kostei knew that he had been hopelessly beaten, and the prince and princess continued their journey without any more adventures. The Simpleton. There lived, once upon a time, a man who was as rich as he could be. But as no happiness in this world is ever quite complete, he had an only son who was such a simpleton that he could barely add 2 and 2 together. At last, his father determined to put up with his stupidity no longer, and giving him a purse full of gold, he sent him off to seek his fortune in foreign lands, mindful of the adage, "How much a fool that's sent to Rome excels, a fool that stays at home." Moscione, for this was the youth's name, mounted a horse and set out for Venice, hoping to find a ship there that would take him to Cairo. After he had ridden for some time, he saw a man standing at the foot of a poplar tree and said to him, "What's your name, my friend? Where do you come from? And what can you do?" The man replied, "My name is Quick as Thought. I come from Fleet Town, and I can run like lightning." "I should like to see you," returned Moscione. "Just wait a minute, then," said Quick as Thought, "and I will soon show you that I am speaking the truth." The words were hardly out of his mouth when a young doe ran right across the field they were standing in. Quick as Thought let her run on a short distance in order to give her a start, and then pursued her so quickly and so lightly that you could not have tracked his footsteps if the field had been strewn with flour. In a very few springs, he had overtaken the doe, and had so impressed Moscione with his fleetness of foot that he begged Quick as Thought to go with him, promising at the same time to reward him handsomely. Quick as Thought agreed to his proposal, and they continued on their journey together. They had hardly gone a mile when they met a young man, and Moscione stopped and asked him, "What's your name, my friend? Where do you come from? And what can you do?" The man thus addressed answered promptly, "I am called Hare's Ear. I come from Curiosity Valley. And if I lay my ear on the ground without moving from the spot, I can hear everything that goes on in the world, the plots and intrigues of court and cottage, and all the plans of mice and men." "If that's the case," replied Moscione, "just tell me what's going on in my own home at present." The youth laid his ear to the ground and at once reported, "An old man is saying to his wife, 'Heaven be praised that we have got rid of Moscione, for perhaps when he has been out in the world a little, he may gain some common sense and return home less of a fool than when he set out.'" "Enough, enough," cried Moscione. "You speak the truth, and I believe you. Come with us, and your fortune's made." The young man consented, and after they had gone about 10 miles, they met a third man, to whom Moscione said, "What's your name, my brave fellow? Where were you born? And what can you do?" The man replied, "I am called Hit the Point. I come from the city of Perfect Aim, and I draw my bow so exactly that I can shoot a pea off a stone. I should like to see you do it, if you've no objection," said Moscione. The man at once placed a pea on a stone, and drawing his bow, he shot it in the middle with the greatest possible ease. When Moscione saw that he had spoken the truth, he immediately asked Hit the Point to join his party. After they had all traveled together for some days, they came upon a number of people who were digging a trench in the blazing sun. Moscione felt so sorry for them that he said, "My dear friends, how can you endure working so hard in heat that would cook an egg in a minute?" But one of the workmen answered, "We are as fresh as daisies, for we have a young man among us who blows on our backs like the west wind." "Let me see him," said Moscione. The youth was called, and Moscione asked him, "What's your name? Where do you come from? And what can you do?" He answered, "I am called Blowblast. I come from Wind Town, and with my mouth I can make any winds you please. If you wish a west wind, I can raise it for you in a second. But if you prefer a north wind, I can blow these houses down before your eyes." "Seeing is believing," returned the cautious Moscione. Blowblast at once began to convince him of the truth of his assertion. First, he blew so softly that it seemed like the gentle breeze at evening. And then he turned round and raised such a mighty storm that he blew down a whole row of oak trees. When Moscione saw this, he was delighted, and begged Blowblast to join his company. And as they went on their way, they met another man, whom Moscione addressed as usual. "What's your name? Where do you come from? And what can you do?" "I am called Strongback. I come from Powerborough, and I possess such strength that I can take a mountain on my back, and it seems a feather to me." "If that's the case," said Moscione, "you are a clever fellow, but I should like some proof of your strength." Then Strongback loaded himself with great boulders of rock and trunks of trees, so that 100 wagons could not have taken away all that he carried on his back. When Moscione saw this, he prevailed on Strongback to join his troop. And they all continued their journey till they came to a country called Flower Vale. Here there reigned a king whose only daughter ran as quickly as the wind, and so lightly that she could run over a field of young oats without bending a single blade. The king had given out a proclamation that anyone who could beat the princess in a race should have her for a wife, but that all who failed in the competition should lose their head. As soon as Moscione heard of the royal proclamation, he hastened to the king and challenged the princess to race with him. But on the morning appointed for the trial, he sent word to the king that he was not feeling well, and that, as he could not run himself, he would supply someone to take his place. "It's just the same to me," said Cannetella, the princess. "Let anyone come forward that likes. I am quite prepared to meet him." At the time appointed for the race, the whole place was crowded with people anxious to see the contest, and punctual to the moment, quick as thought, and Cannetella, dressed in a short skirt and very lightly shod, appeared at the starting point. Then a silver trumpet sounded, and the two rivals started on their race, looking for all the world like a greyhound chasing a hare. But quick as thought, true to his name, outran the princess. And when the goal was reached, the people all clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the stranger!" Cannetella was much depressed by her defeat, but as the race had to be run a second time, she determined she would not be beaten again. Accordingly, she went home and sent quick as thought a magic ring, which prevented the person who wore it not only from running, but even from walking, and begged that he would wear it for her sake. Early next morning, the crowd assembled on the race course, and Cannetella and Quick as Thought began their trial afresh. The princess ran as quickly as ever, but poor Quick as Thought was like an overloaded donkey and could not go a step. Then hit the point, who had heard all about the princess's deception from Hare's ear, when he saw the danger his friend was in, seized his bow and arrow, and shot the stone out of the ring Quick as Thought was wearing. In a moment, the youth's legs became free again, and in 5 bounds he had overtaken Cannetella and won the race. The king was much disgusted when he saw that he must acknowledge Moscione as his future son-in-law, and summoned the wise men of his court to ask if there was no way out of the difficulty. The council at once decided that Cannetella was far too dainty a morsel for the mouth of such a traveling tinker, and advised the king to offer Moscione a present of gold, which, no doubt, a beggar like him would prefer to all the wives in the world. The king was delighted at this suggestion, and calling Moscione before him, he asked him what sum of money he would take instead of his promised bride. Moscione first consulted with his friends, and then answered, "I demand as much gold and precious stones as my followers can carry away." The king thought he was being let off very easily, and produced coffers of gold, sacks of silver, and chests of precious stones. But the more strong back was loaded with the treasure, the straighter he stood. At last the treasury was quite exhausted, and the king had to send his courtiers to his subjects to collect all the gold and silver they possessed. But nothing was of any avail, and Strongback only asked for more. When the king's counselors saw the unexpected result of their advice, they said it would be more than foolish to let some strolling thieves take so much treasure out of the country, and urged the king to send a troop of soldiers after them to recover the gold and precious stones. So the king sent a body of armed men on foot and horse to take back the treasure Strongback was carrying away with him. But Hare's Ear, who had heard what the counselors had advised the king, told his companions, just as the dust of their pursuers was visible on the horizon. No sooner had Blowblast taken in their danger than he raised such a mighty wind that all the king's army was blown down like so many ninepins. And as they were quite unable to get up again, Moscione and his companions proceeded on their way without further let or hindrance. As soon as they reached his home, Moscione divided his spoil with his companions, at which they were much delighted. He himself stayed with his father, who was obliged at last to acknowledge that his son was not quite such a fool as he looked. The street musicians. A man once possessed a donkey, which had served him faithfully for many years. But at last, the poor beast grew old and feeble, and every day his work became more of a burden. As he was no longer of any use, his master made up his mind to shoot him. But when the donkey learnt the fate that was in store for him, he determined not to die, but to run away to the nearest town, and there to become a street musician. When he had trotted along for some distance, he came upon a greyhound lying on the road and panting for dear life. "Well, brother," said the donkey, "what's the matter with you? You look rather tired." "So I am," replied the dog. "But because I am getting old and am growing weaker every day and cannot go out hunting any longer, my master wanted to poison me. And as life is still sweet, I have taken leave of him. But how I am to earn my own livelihood, I haven't a notion." "Well," said the donkey, "I am on my way to the nearest big town, where I mean to become a street musician. Why don't you take up music as a profession and come along with me? I'll play the flute and you can play the kettle drum." The greyhound was quite pleased at the idea, and the two set off together. When they had gone a short distance, they met a cat with a face as long as 3 rainy days. "Now, what has happened to upset your happiness, friend Puss?" inquired the donkey. "It's impossible to look cheerful when one feels depressed," answered the cat. "I am well up in years now and have lost most of my teeth. Consequently, I prefer sitting in front of the fire to catching mice. And so my old mistress wanted to drown me. I have no wish to die yet, so I ran away from her. But good advice is expensive, and I don't know where I am to go to or what I am to do." "Come to the nearest big town with us," said the donkey, "and try your fortune as a street musician. I know what sweet music you make at night, so you are sure to be a success." The cat was delighted with the donkey's proposal, and they all continued their journey together. In a short time, they came to the courtyard of an inn, where they found a cock crowing lustily. "What in the world is the matter with you?" asked the donkey. "The noise you are making is enough to break the drums of our ears." "I am only prophesying good weather," said the cock, "for tomorrow is a feast day. And just because it is a holiday and a number of people are expected at the inn, the landlady has given orders for my neck to be wrung tonight, so that I may be made into soup for tomorrow's dinner." "I'll tell you what, Redcap," said the donkey. "You had much better come with us to the nearest town. You have got a good voice and could join a street band we are getting up." The cock was much pleased with the idea, and the party proceeded on their way. But the nearest big town was a long way off, and it took them more than a day to reach it. In the evening, they came to a wood, and they made up their minds to go no further, but to spend the night there. The donkey and the greyhound lay down under a big tree, and the cat and the cock got up into the branches, the cock flying right up to the topmost twig, where he thought he would be safe from all danger. Before he went to sleep, he looked round the 4 points of the compass and saw a little spark burning in the distance. He called out to his companions that he was sure there must be a house not far off, for he could see a light shining. When he heard this, the donkey said at once, "Then we must get up and go and look for the house, for this is very poor shelter." And the greyhound added, "Yes, I feel I'd be all the better for a few bones and a scrap or two of meat." So they set out for the spot where the light was to be seen shining faintly in the distance. But the nearer they approached it, the brighter it grew, till at last they came to a brilliantly lighted house. The donkey, being the biggest of the party, went to the window and looked in. "Well, Greyhead, what do you see?" asked the cock. "I see a well-covered table," replied the donkey, "with excellent food and drink, and several robbers are sitting round it, enjoying themselves highly." "I wish we were doing the same," said the cock. "So do I," answered the donkey. "Can't we think of some plan for turning out the robbers and taking possession of the house ourselves? So they consulted together what they were to do. And at last they arranged that the donkey should stand at the window with his forefeet on the sill, that the greyhound should get on his back, the cat on the dog's shoulder, and the cock on the cat's head. When they had grouped themselves in this way, at a given signal, they all began their different forms of music. The donkey brayed, the greyhound barked, the cat meowed, and the cock crew. Then they all scrambled through the window into the room, breaking the glass into 1,000 pieces as they did so. The robbers were all startled by the dreadful noise, and thinking that some evil spirits, at the least, were entering the house, they rushed out into the wood, their hair standing on end with terror. The 4 companions, delighted with the success of their trick, sat down at the table and ate and drank all the food and wine that the robbers had left behind them. When they had finished their meal, they put out the lights, and each animal chose a suitable sleeping place. The donkey lay down in the courtyard outside the house, the dog behind the door, the cat in front of the fire, and the cock flew up onto a high shelf. And as they were all tired after their long day, they soon went to sleep. Shortly after midnight, when the robbers saw that no light was burning in the house and that all seemed quiet, the captain of the band said, "We were fools to let ourselves be so easily frightened away." And turning to one of his men, he ordered him to go in and see if all was safe. The man found everything in silence and darkness, and going into the kitchen, he thought he had better strike a light. He took a match, and mistaking the fiery eyes of the cat for 2 glowing coals, he tried to light his match with them. But the cat didn't see the joke and sprang at his face, spitting and scratching him in the most vigorous manner. The man was terrified out of his life and tried to run out by the back door, but he stumbled over the greyhound, which bit him in the leg. Yelling with pain, he ran across the courtyard, only to receive a kick from the donkey's hind leg as he passed him. In the meantime, the cock had been roused from his slumbers, and feeling very cheerful, he called out from the shelf where he was perched, "Kikeriki!" Then the robber hastened back to his captain and said, "Sir, there is a dreadful witch in the house who spat at me and scratched my face with her long fingers. And before the door there stands a man with a long knife who cut my leg severely. In the courtyard outside lies a black monster who fell upon me with a huge wooden club. And that is not all, for sitting on the roof is a judge who called out, 'Bring the rascal to me.' So I fled for dear life. After this, the robbers dared not venture into the house again, and they abandoned it forever. But the 4 street musicians were so delighted with their lodgings that they determined to take up their abode in the robber's house. And for all I know to the contrary, they may be living there to this day. The twin brothers. Once there was a fisherman who had plenty of money, but no children. One day, an old woman came to his wife and said, "What use is all your prosperity to you when you have no children?" "It is God's will," answered the fisherman's wife. "Nay, my child, it is not God's will, but the fault of your husband. For if he would but catch the little goldfish, you would surely have children. Tonight, when he comes home, tell him he must go back and catch the little fish. He must then cut it in 6 pieces. One of these you must eat, and your husband the second. And soon after, you will have 2 children. The 3rd piece you must give to the dog, and she will have 2 puppies. The 4th piece give to the mare, and she will have 2 foals. The 5th piece bury on the right of the house door, and the 6th on the left. And 2 cypress trees will spring up there. When the fisherman came home at evening, his wife told him all that the old woman had advised, and he promised to bring home the little goldfish. Next morning, therefore, he went very early to the water and caught the little fish. Then they did as the old woman had ordered, and in due time the fisherman's wife had 2 sons, so like each other that no one could tell the difference. The dog had 2 puppies, exactly alike. The mare had 2 foals, and on each side of the front door there sprang up 2 cypress trees, precisely similar. When the 2 boys were grown up, they were not content to remain at home, though they had wealth in plenty, but they wished to go out into the world and make a name for themselves. Their father would not allow them both to go at once, as they were the only children he had. He said, "First, one shall travel, and when he is come back, then the other may go." So the one took his horse and his and went, saying to his brother, "So long as the cypress trees are green, that is a sign that I am alive and well. But if one begins to wither, then make haste and come to me." So he went forth into the world. One day, he stopped at the house of an old woman, and as at evening he sat before the door, he perceived in front of him a castle standing on a hill. He asked the old woman to whom it belonged, and her answer was, "My son, it is the castle of the fairest in the land, and I am come here to woo her. That, my son, many have sought to do, and have lost their lives in the attempt, for she has cut off their heads and stuck them on the post you see standing there. And the same will she do to me, or else I shall be victor, for tomorrow I go there to court her." Then he took his zither and played upon it so beautifully that no one in all that land had ever heard the like, and the princess herself came to the window to listen. The next morning, the fairest in the land sent for the old woman and asked her, "Who is it that lives with you and plays the zither so well?" "It is a stranger, princess, who arrived yesterday evening," answered the old woman. And the princess then commanded that the stranger should be brought to her. When he appeared before the princess, she questioned him about his home and his family, and about this and that, and confessed at length that his zither playing gave her great pleasure, and that she would take him for her husband. The stranger replied that it was with that intent he had come. The princess then said, "You must now go to my father and tell him you desire to have me to wife. And when he has put the 3 problems before you, then come back and tell me." The stranger then went straight to the king and told him that he wished to wed his daughter. And the king answered, "I shall be well pleased, provided you can do what I impose upon you. If not, you will lose your head. Now, listen. Out there on the ground, there lies a thick log, which measures more than 2 fathoms. If you can cleave it in 2 with 1 stroke of your sword, I will give you my daughter to wife. If you fail, then it will cost you your head." Then the stranger withdrew and returned to the house of the old woman, sore distressed, for he could believe nothing but that next day he must atone to the king with his head. And so full was he of the idea of how to set about cleaving the log that he forgot even his zither. In the evening came the princess to the window to listen to his playing. And behold, all was still. Then she called to him, "Why are you so cast down this evening, that you do not play on your zither?" And he told her his trouble, but she laughed at it and called to him, "And you grieve over that? Bring quickly your zither, and play something for my amusement, and early tomorrow come to me." Then the stranger took his zither and played the whole evening for the amusement of the princess. Next morning, she took a hair from her locks and gave it to him, saying, "Take this hair and wind it round your sword. Then you will be able to cleave the log in 2. Then the stranger went forth, and with 1 blow cleft the log in 2. But the king said, "I will impose another task upon you before you can wed my daughter." "Speak on," said the stranger. "Listen, then," answered the king. "You must mount a horse and ride 3 miles at full gallop, holding in each hand a goblet full of water. If you spill no drop, then I shall give you my daughter to wife. But should you not succeed, then I will take your life." Then the stranger returned to the house of the old woman, and again he was so troubled as to forget his zither. In the evening, the princess came to the window as before to listen to the music. But again, all was still, and she called to him, "What is the matter that you do not play?" on your zither." Then he related all that the king had ordered him to do. And the princess answered, "Do not let yourself be disturbed. Only play now, and come to me tomorrow morning." Then next morning he went to her, and she gave him her ring, saying, "Throw this ring into the water, and it will immediately freeze, so that you will not spill any." The stranger did as the princess bade him, and carried the water all the way. Then the king said, "Now I will give you a third task, and this shall be the last. I have a Negro who will fight with you tomorrow. And if you are the conqueror, you shall wed my daughter." The stranger returned, full of joy, to the house of the old woman. And that evening was so merry that the princess called to him, "You seem very cheerful this evening. What has my father told you that makes you so glad?" He answered, "Your father has told me that tomorrow I must fight with his Negro. He is only another man like myself, and I hope to subdue him and to gain the contest." But the princess answered, "This is the hardest of all. I myself am the black man, for I swallow a drink that changes me into a Negro of unconquerable strength. Go tomorrow morning to the market, buy 12 buffalo hides, and wrap them round your horse. Fasten this cloth round you, and when I am let loose upon you tomorrow, show it to me, that I may hold myself back and may not kill you. Then, when you fight me, you must try to hit my horse between the eyes, for when you have killed it, you have conquered me." Next morning, therefore, he went to the market and bought the 12 buffalo hides, which he wrapped round his horse. Then he began to fight with the black man. And when the combat had already lasted a long time, and 11 hides were torn, then the stranger hit the Negro's horse between the eyes, so that it fell dead, and the black man was defeated. Then said the king, "Because you have solved the 3 problems, I take you for my son-in-law." But the stranger answered, "I have some business to conclude first. In 14 days I will return and bring the bride home." So he arose and went into another country, where he came to a great town and alighted at the house of an old woman. When he had had supper, he begged of her some water to drink. But she answered, "My son, I have no water. A giant has taken possession of the spring and only lets us draw from it once a year when we bring him a maiden. He eats her up, and then he lets us draw water. Just now, it is the lot of the king's daughter, and tomorrow she will be led forth." The next day, accordingly, the princess was led forth to the spring and bound there with a golden chain. After that, all the people went away, and she was left alone. When they had gone, the stranger went to the maiden and asked her what ailed her, that she lamented so much. And she answered that the reason was because the giant would come and eat her up. And the stranger promised that he would set her free if she would take him for her husband. And the princess joyfully consented. When the giant appeared, the stranger set his dog at him, and it took him by the throat and throttled him till he died. So the princess was set free. Now when the king heard of it, he gladly consented to the marriage, and the wedding took place with great rejoicings. The young bridegroom abode in the palace 101 weeks. Then he began to find it too dull, and he desired to go out hunting. The king would fain have prevented it, but in this he could not succeed. Then he begged his son-in-law at least to take sufficient escort with him. But this too the young man evaded, and took only his horse and his dog. He had ridden already a long way, when he saw in the distance a hut, and rode straight towards it in order to get some water to drink. There he found an old woman from whom he begged the water. She answered that first he should allow her to beat his dog with her little wand, that it might not bite her while she fetched the water. The hunter consented, and as soon as she had touched the dog with her wand, it immediately turned to stone. Thereupon she touched the hunter and also his horse, and both turned to stone. As soon as that had happened, the cypress trees in front of his father's house began to wither. And when the other brother saw this, he immediately set out in search of his twin. He came first to the town where his brother had slain the giant, and there fate led him to the same old woman where his brother had lodged. When she saw him, she took him for his twin brother, and said to him, "Do not take it amiss of me, my son, that I did not come to wish you joy on your marriage with the king's daughter." The stranger perceived what mistake she had made, but only said, "That does not matter, old woman," and rode on, without further speech, to the king's palace, where the king and the princess both took him for his twin brother, and called out, "Why have you tarried so long away? We thought something evil had befallen you." When night came, and he slept with the princess, who still believed him to be her husband, he laid his sword between them. And when morning came, he rose early and went out to hunt. Fate led him by the same way which his brother had taken. And from a distance he saw him and knew that he was turned to stone. Then he entered the hut and ordered the old woman to disenchant his brother. But she answered, "Let me first touch your dog with my wand, and then I will free your brother." He ordered the dog, however, to take hold of her and bite her up to the knee, till she cried out, "Tell your dog to let me go, and I will set your brother free." But he only answered, "Tell me the magic words, that I may disenchant him myself." And as she would not, he ordered his dog to bite her up to the hip. Then the old woman cried out, "I have 2 wands. With the green one I turn to stone, and with the red one I bring to life again." So the hunter took the red wand and disenchanted his brother, also his brother's horse and his dog, and ordered his own dog to eat the old woman up altogether, while the brothers went on their way back to the castle of the king. The one brother related to the other how the cypress tree had all at once dried up and withered, how he had immediately set out in search of his twin, and how he had come to the castle of his father-in-law, and had claimed the princess as his wife. But the other brother became furious on hearing this, and smote him over the forehead till he died, and returned alone to the house of his father-in-law. When night came and he was in bed, the princess asked him, "What was the matter with you last night, that you never spoke a word to me?" Then he cried out, "That was not me, but my brother, and I have slain him, because he told me, by the way, that he had claimed you for his wife." "Do you know the place where you slew him?" asked the princess. "And can you find the body?" "I know the place exactly." "Then tomorrow we shall ride thither," said the princess. Next morning, accordingly, they set out together. And when they had come to the place, the princess drew forth a small bottle that she had brought with her, and sprinkled the body with some drops of the water, so that immediately he became alive again. When he stood up, his brother said to him, "Forgive me, dear brother, that I slew you in my anger." Then they embraced and went together to the fairest in the land, whom the unmarried brother took to wife. Then the brothers brought their parents to live with them, and all dwelt together in joy and happiness.